There's something orange on my cup. I got this cup. Emily got me this cup, and it's like something orange on it. I don't know what it is.
Damn.
All right. I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Beau, Travail.
Damn it, I already forgot that. How do we do
What?
that? Manchurian Canada, that's it.
Yeah, the original one from the 1960s, directed by John Frankenheimer.
That's the movie we're going to be watching next week. I'm excited. This whole collection on Criterion
Yeah, I
looks
was like scrolling
wild.
through it. I hadn't gotten a chance to like look at it, the Hollywood Crack Up collection on there, but I was like scrolling through it and I'm just like, oh, great movie, great movie, great movie. It just, and you know what? They also have that 1999 collection on there, which has
Yeah.
Beau Travail on there. So
Yeah, I was on Criterion this morning because I did watch the movie this morning. I was trying to get a habit of watching movies
it
during the
doesn't
week,
matter.
but
Honestly, this movie, it was probably best to watch it in one sitting, if possible.
yeah.
I don't think it would have had much, and I guess that's the problem with like doing that, or like watching a movie through different, like, you know,
Hmm.
it does maybe lessens its effect in some cases. In some cases, it doesn't. I think they're playing, but this is a movie where I think you probably made the right decision to watch it from beginning to end. And it's not too long either. It's only 90 minutes, I
No.
guess. But so I think again, it depends, but I think this is the case of a movie in which, yeah, you just gotta be locked in for the whole thing, I think.
Yeah, and it's such a hypnotizing film too, because
Yep.
I mean, if you talk about this film, there's not really much of a plot. There's not a whole lot of story going on in this piece, other than we have our main Legionnaire guy, and he's got his group of men, and they're kind of
Right.
just doing their everyday life, which my cousin was in the military for 10 years, and then a lot of my family members were in the military. Obviously, not the French military, it's different,
The
but
Legionnaires,
the
the Legion,
Legionnaires.
the Foreign Legion.
But I know, and this is more modern military than, say, like family members who served in like Korea, World War II, or that sort of thing. That's obviously kind of its own specific thing. But they talk about how most of being in the military nowadays is kind of just chores and just
It's
moving
just it's
boxes.
routine. Yeah, yeah,
It's just
yeah.
routine,
It's the
right?
routines, which is specifically stated in the movie,
Hmm.
basically.
And that's, I think, what this film is a lot about. It's how do we find identity? I mean, we have that moment towards the end of the film where he says you're not African anymore, you're a legionnaire, right? This
Yeah,
idea of
you're a
letting go of
Legionnaire.
your nationality or your
Yeah,
identity, anything beyond that. And we see that with all militaries, not just the French military, but any military. It's a way of disassociating the self
yeah.
and instead being part of this larger group, this sort of larger thing, even though it's sort of arbitrary, like they don't really do
No, no, no.
anything.
So no, this is the perfect like 1999 movie because it's like the one of the greatest post-colonial movies ever because they do all these things together. They do all these chores. They do all these kind of like there's a part of the beginning where they pretend to storm a building, but it's like
Mhm.
abandoned. There's no walls or windows or anything in it. And it's like they're doing all these like things they're training. And it's like, well, what are they training for? It's 1999. It's not like France is like as powerful as it was like a century ago. They're not really fighting any wars. There's nothing really to like to defend. They're in Djibouti, by the
Mhm.
way. And everywhere they go, they're kind of like have like kind of like this like disdain from the locals too. Like they look at them with kind of like incredulence. Like they're not maybe not anger, just kind of like more like annoyance. Like
Yeah.
like these guys, like whatever. Like they don't really like they they're just kind of like out there like hanging out like there's like it's the perfect like post-colonial kind of like existential kind of crisis movie for like these like powerful European nations of like who are so powerful and militaristic, and they still have these like military institutions
Mhm.
embedded in these places, but again it's like there's nothing. What's the cause? And I think you have that one Russian guy who's like
Yeah.
who's like, I was in Russia, I was in the Russian military, but I left because the pay wasn't good enough. It had nothing to do with like, and he's like,
No.
it's kind of hard to fight for a cause, right? Like now it's like completely cynical. There's no like national like there's no national
Unity.
uh unity, or yeah, or there's no national kind of cause to fight for anymore. It's just kind of now about like, surviving as like an individual. uh so yeah, and the fact that the movie came out in 1999 is like perfect. It's like it's kind of just, it's like right there just as the 21st century is coming around.
Yeah, it's this amazing moment in time where sort of this sense of nationalism and sense of borders is really being let go because of the recent creation of, or use, I guess, of the internet and sort of the
Yeah.
globalization of the world. And being part of a country at this point in time, right? Like they don't identify themselves even when they're part of that military group. They don't even identify themselves as French. They don't identify themselves with any country at all, even though these people are from, different countries across the world. They are merely legionnaires. That's the only identity that they can hold on to, that they can grasp. And
Mhm.
just the sense of being loyal to any country, even to these people who are literally serving, right, in a military
Yeah.
for the country, is completely meaningless. And you see that
Yeah.
throughout this piece. And even our protagonist, the guy we're following around, our narrator, I
Denis
suppose,
Levant. Yeah, it's
Denis Levant,
Galut. Galut. Well, that's the actor, but I think the his name is Galut.
Galou, oh,
Yeah.
The French and their silly names. But even he, you see, because it does this interesting thing where it's sort of shaped through a flashback or almost this Paul Schrader
He
writing
it
in notebooks.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, he's like remembering back to this time, right? Because now he's back in France. So basically what happens at the end is that he basically almost kills, well, he almost kills the younger, the guy who, the new recruit,
Yeah.
Centane or Centan, I don't know.
Tintin.
Centane.
Mhm.
And he gets like court-martialed, and he's basically like he has to leave the Legion, and he's just living in France, just doing whatever. Um and um he's like kind of like harkening back, right, to when he was still in the Legion and Djibouti
Mhm.
and the things that he did. And I think the way that the movie is shot and edited is almost kind of like, it kind of almost is kind of like this Proustian reverie kind of memory, kind of a cavalcade, like where you're just like it's almost like as if you are remembering kind of like all these like different moments and stuff, like here and there. Like you are Galut, like as he's remembering it, not necessarily how it happened in order or how it happened. Like scenes will like they'll start out of nowhere and then they'll end out of nowhere.
Mhm.
Like a memory, I guess.
Yeah, there's this great intertwining between the past and the present, as if there isn't this separation between one or other, or rather they exist simultaneously. And this whole idea of memory, rather than being this solid thing that we can hold on to, and this is something that I've been talking about with my students a lot lately, because we've been working on historical fiction and how do we recreate memories, and the shaping of memories through not only what happened in the past, but also through the lens that we see now. And that's exactly what we see with this. There is this sort of rose-colored glasses thing going on where he's looking on his past and he's reshaping his own memories
Yeah.
to reflect what's going on in his life right now and
He's like
sort of
an unreliable narrator, kind of.
hmm yeah, there's a certain nostalgia to the past. I mean, you only see the
Hmm.
beautiful landscapes, and for really, I
Yeah,
would
it's
say until
sick.
the helicopter scene, I mean, it's
Hmm.
just so buoyant and bright, and everyone's just having a good time and everyone's happy, right?
Very
They're just
blue, the
hanging out,
sea.
very blue,
I
beautiful.
will, I will, I think like the look of the movie is like consistent throughout. Like when they look out into, like when you get like the landscapes of like the Djibouti, and you see how um, it's so like blue and gray, but there is something kind of like lonely about it. Like it's very desolate. Like they're basically in the desert. Like the sea is
Yeah.
really beautiful, but they're in the desert essentially. Like there's like nothing there. Occasionally they'll like go in town to go to like the dance club, of course, to dance with girls and stuff like that. But other than that, they're just kind of like chilling by the seaside, doing whatever, pretty much. But it is lonely.
Yeah, it's completely isolated even from the local community, which I think is part of the reason there's
Yeah.
sort of this disdain, annoyance, whatever word you want to use between the locals and these people because
Yeah.
they're not protecting them, right? They're not there to protect anybody,
Yeah.
but they're not there to conquer them either. They're not there to take
Or
over and
yeah.
control it and like overthrow the government. They're just kind of there
They're
existing
just
and
kind of
they're
like
just
sitting
getting
on their post.
resources.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're just sitting as sentries. And there's this moment early on in the film where we're in the city and
Hmm.
one of the locals walks into some sort of shop. I think it's like a rug shop or something. But the
Yeah.
outside of it is on the left is that Coca-Cola ad, and on
Right.
the
And the
right is
Sprite
the
ad.
Sprite ad.
Yeah, that's
It's like
pretty
this.
funny.
It's this great juxtaposition of this sort of local African community with this modernized American French whatever, right? It's
Advertising.
this
It's just
this
advertising. Yeah.
weird combination that doesn't really fit. And it's a perfect explanation, right, of the Legionnaires in this community. Like, there's no
Yeah.
reason that they should be there. They're not adding any value to the local community. They just
Right.
kind of
Except to
are.
and to further, the capital interest of like,
Yeah.
the world economy of the United States and Europe in any way, shape, or form. And and I guess the military, I guess, will be there in a moment's notice if that capital is um you know infringed upon in any way. That's probably the real point of France or Germany or whatever being in an African country at this point. But that's not really discussed in the movie. Again, like the like in a way, like the real reason why they're there is be so these guys can just like hang out and chill and like do chores and stuff and do like these like weird exercises. You talked about kind of how like has this hypnotic quality to it, and I agree. It's kind of like has this very kind of like, and people have made this. I'm not really like the this is not like an original opinion, but it's true. It has this ballet quality to it. The movie, the way that everybody kind of like moves in sync with each other, as if you're watching some kind of like dance or something like that. You have that one weird kind of moment where both of the characters, Galou and Centane, they're like circling each other as they're staring.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like that amazing scene. And it's like that's like a ballet move, or the one where they're like hugging each other over and over
Mhm.
again. That feels also like a very like I feel like I've seen that kind of type of move like in a dance before of some sort. It has this, a kind of like choreographed, harmonious quality to it, um, that really makes the movie go really, really far while you're watching it. Because other than that, like we talked about, there's not like a ton of plot or a lot of talking.
No. There's nothing specifically pushing for because we talked about earlier the fact that he basically almost kills a guy, but that doesn't happen
Right.
until like the last 15
Pretty
minutes of
much.
the film. And there's
And
nothing really building up to that except for
there's no
like for it.
violence.
No.
No. You think like the movie's gonna reach this head where like it gets really violent and it doesn't really, the movie, like again, it's a movie that is all about kind of like stepping back, like don't like not necessarily showing every single moment of everything. Um, and I love when movies do that. I love when movies just kind of like don't do aren't interested in showing every single thing happening at every moment possible and instead kind of like lets your imagination run its course. Our brains I think are smart enough to fill in the gaps when needed. But of course, if you were to put this on for, I don't know, an average American film viewer, they would be probably really frustrated with it because they would just be like, what the hell? Like, why? Like what happened there? What's going on here? Why is he doing this? Like there's so many unanswered questions and so many holes. But for me, I love that because again, it's a movie that is trusting in the audience to be smart enough to fill in the holes and just kind of like take in the lyrical sort of like like poetic quality of the film and its images rather than just like telling you a story.
Yeah, and I think of those moments, which they cut back to this moment, or rather, a couple of these moments where they're all standing sort of in this open arm position, almost as if they are praying
Yeah.
to the sun itself, right? And of
Yeah.
course, you have these beautiful movements throughout where the camera has this sort of flowing quality to it, and I think that's part of the hypnotizing nature of this piece, is it is almost constantly moving, and it's not this jarring movements of an action piece or a classic military film. It kind of has this, as you're saying, balletic movement to it that sort of flows and ebbs, and you're kind of getting this back and forth between our different characters and these different movements that they do, and they're sort of
Mhm.
reenacting violence, right? They are creating the illusion of violence through these trainings, but we don't, other than really, there's only two moments that you really see anything that's violence. And even those moments of violence, they kind of cut around it. You don't actually see the violence itself, which, of course, one is the explosion of the helicopter, which it's interesting that the reason the helicopter exploded, no one knows, but it was during a training. It wasn't an attack. No one was attacking this helicopter. So their deaths were completely arbitrary. Like there's no reason that these people died. And the
Mhm.
only other moment of any sort of violence, which again, you don't really see the violence, is when our uh,
Mhm.
protagonist is punched in the face. I mean, that's pretty much it. Like, that is the only moments where they actually,
Protagonist.
well, yeah,
Yeah.
quote unquote.
I know what you mean. Yeah. Galut.
Yeah, you're right.
Galut was punched in the face. And it's like a weird scene too where he's like doing it in slow
Slow
motion.
motion.
It's a very fun decision to do. Like even like the moment, even that moment is like again, there's just something kind of like I don't know, it just like for some reason that moment, that scene and many scenes in the movie just feel like they operate on kind of like this memory kind of dream like rules and logic in a way. Um, so it makes perfect sense when he does that. Again, an average person probably see that and be like, "That was so stupid. Like, why didn't he just like punch him normally in the movie?" But for me, it makes perfect sense in the logic of and the vibe of the film.
Yeah, and you see that quite a few times in the film
Mhm.
where people will move at almost this agonizingly
Mhm.
slow pace. It looks as if it's slow motion, but of course it's playing
Yeah,
in real time. And it, again, as you're saying, it's sort of working in that dreamlike space where movement doesn't really work the
yeah,
way it usually does. Like things kind of move
yeah,
in this weird pace. And you have the opposite too. You also have moments where people are moving like significantly faster
yeah.
than they actually do. And it's almost has like this hand crank, 1920s quality to it where things don't often move at the right speed. Things are kind of always have almost this glitchy quality to them where everything's just kind of a little bit off. Something just isn't right. And from that moment that the helicopter crashes and that man dies, the other one survives, there's this certain ominousness that sort of undercarries the rest of the film. And there's still another 45 minutes. I mean, this is only about halfway, maybe not even halfway through the film.
Yeah,
And
and he
that's
saves
when
it.
they
Yeah,
go out and they build the camp and do all that stuff. And it's again like they're
yeah.
putting up barbed wire, right? They're building this encampment. And
Yeah, it's like what are they
for
defending
what?
themselves
For
against?
why?
Who's the enemy? Like there's nothing like that. It's just kind of all for show, I guess. It's for fun. It's like these it's like Boy Scouts on summer camp.
Yeah. It's very odd.
Uh, We were talking too about like, oh, but did you know this movie is loosely based off Billy Budd, the Herman Melville novel or
Really?
novella? It
I did
it
not
is,
know
yeah.
this.
Yeah. It doesn't really say in the credits of the movie, if I'm
Yeah.
sure. And it actually, when when they play classical music, which
Mhm.
again, there's very weird disposition between when they're training with the classical music. It's very kind of like jarring.
Mhm.
That classical music is from um an opera based on the novella, the Billy Budd novella. So it's very
Wow.
weird. Um these different things kind of like mashed together in this way. I never read the novella, so I can't really say anything about it, but it is interesting. And it makes sense too. Like the movie does kind of have this like homoerotic quality. I think that's fair to say.
Yes.
Um, it's really about and we've talked a lot about the movie, but the movie is really about the story about this guy who is in love with another guy. Like Galou is in love with Centane,
Hmm.
but he doesn't know how to like express himself. Like he's totally repressed his feelings for so many years, right? Like in the military, in the French Legion. And he is totally jealous of him. I think like, yeah, he's probably jealous of he explicitly says in the movie that he's jealous of him. Um, and to the viewer, and I think to again, an average viewer would be like, I don't understand. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me why this guy hates him so much. Um, there's no reason why he should. Like, he hasn't done anything to like hurt him or wrong him. Like, I don't understand why he's so upset. And of course, over the course of the movie, you realize like that's kind of the point. Like, there's no point to hate him.
Yeah.
That's why he hates him because he doesn't really hate him. He loves him, right?
Mhm.
He's repressed. Um, and that's kind of really what the movie's about. It's about kind of like this, uh, this explosion of like kind of like masculine repression, between these like two people. Um, and it's such a good story. Like it couldn't have been told any better way.
Yeah, this theme of masculinity, which I think is even more peculiar when you put it in sort of the limelight of the French, right? Which famously, of course, kind of the rest of the world sees the French as sort of right emasculated often, and
Yeah,
so and then of course you have the military, which is often hyper masculine, and so
sure.
you kind of have like these two things coming together, but then when they're actually together, I mean, there's this almost familial bond between them. So it kind of has to me almost this like incestuous almost
Like
where
father son type of thing.
like father yeah almost like a father son where I mean he
Right.
does have these feelings for him, but then there's also the of course the guilt for him, right, of it's not being a man to love another man
Right.
and all that
Right.
sort of
He's
nonsense.
also there's also the other guy, the older guy who is in charge, the commandant,
Hmm.
who, you know, he, even though we don't like really see every single thing, he is, I guess, giving attention to Saint Anne, and Galou is also jealous of that. So yeah, you're kind of right. It's kind of like this sort of like weird incest father son kind of thing where it's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah, and a big part of it's about power too, right? That ability to control, like this ability to express love by controlling that person, and so that we see that relationship between the commandant and the legionnaire, where he's simultaneously hating or angry with his in command, but he's also
Yeah,
constantly seeking his approval, right? He constantly
right.
wants approval from him, just like the men under him are seeking his approval. Even though, again, this hierarchy that they have built, right? There's no logical reason for this hierarchy. Like it doesn't add anything. Like there's no
It
reason that they need to be
Right,
in this
but the
order.
reason is being in the military,
Yeah.
right? Like that has now like being in the military, I guess, used to mean about like being being at the behest and the defense of your country.
Mhm.
Now it's not about that at all. It's just about being in the military and hanging out with your boys. That's pretty much, like the military culture, the routines, they perpetuate themselves.
Yeah.
There's nothing perpetuating it, like a war or a conflict or a battle. It's now just kind of like its own thing that just exists where all these guys, who are, maybe don't have money, they don't have a home. Again, uh, uh, say 10, we don't know anything about him except the fact that he's an orphan. Like he's like in his early 20s and he's an orphan. And he was found in a stairwell. That's the kind of guy that's like, I guess I'll join the military, right?
Yeah. And you still see this a lot, the way
Sure.
militaries typically, well, I don't know if pray is necessarily the right word, but I would say it's not the right word either. I mean, we have a military person come in almost every single week and try to recruit kids from, a rural community where a lot of these
Sure,
kids
yeah.
aren't going on to college, they're not going on to trade school. And so
Right.
they see it as this sort of path, and it can, right? It can be this path forward, but
Right.
more often than not, it's kind of like, okay, well, we sell this idea of, you're going to go serve your country, you're going to go, be brave and do these things. But the fact of the matter is you're not really doing anything, right? You're not really adding anything to the world. And I guess you're not hurting anything necessarily other than just taking resources from other people.
Right.
But again, I mean, keep going back to this idea of like, what's the point? Why do you like, other than
Yeah,
the
yeah,
idea of
yeah.
like getting your own identity?
Yeah, I do think that like there is a difference between like America and France when it comes to this issue. I will
Sure.
say, I obviously I agree with you. And again, there's this kind of like homoerotic quality as well going on. And Claire Denis, you know, she she kind of like in quite a few cases when they're like working out or doing stuff, she kind of like has this like sort of this like gaze on them, right,
Mhm.
like there's that one scene where she's like kind of like like really kind of like almost like kind of like honing in on their butts as they're like they're like digging or something like that. um like there's this kind of
They're
like,
never wearing
yeah,
shirts. They're
they're
always
never wearing
sweaty.
shirts. They're wearing like, yeah, they're wearing like these like shorts. Like there's that one really funny scene where the African family drives by and they're wearing like these like short shorts and they're not wearing shirts or whatever, and they're kind of like staring at them like what the hell?
Mhm.
Like there's just something like kind of like, yeah, like there's like there are these like military guys, but like this African family driving by are just like, huh, that seems very homoerotic, like they don't even say it. It's just on their faces.
Mhm.
Like there's something kind of gay about it. That's just how it is. And uh but that's like part of it, right? Like that's part of like the culture of at least like the French Foreign Legion, right? You're in
Mhm.
another country, you're hanging out, you hang out with your friends, you get punished, you eat bad food, but you're out there, working a sweat, and you're getting paid for it, and uh, there's not really any real danger, and that, so you're just kind of like there's not really like much, there's not a lot of like at stake, you don't have to worry about like getting like blown up for the most part in Djibouti, which again, I don't really there's not really a threat or anything there. There's no action scene in the movie. It's just kind of like, again, the movie is just this very kind of beautiful lyrical kind of story about like this guy who's been out there for so long, and so this is all he knows, and he obviously loves it, but at the same time he feels threatened by this kind of this feeling that he has of this like love that he has for this guy, and it is just it's explosive.
Yeah, and I think of those moments where he's back home, he's in France, and there's this sort of, it's almost as if he's been, right. We talk about this idea of colonization, and then and living in this sort of post-colonial world where they don't really, right, they don't control these countries anymore, but they still have military forces in these countries. And now he's sent back to his
Mhm.
home, but he has no identity with the French. Like France doesn't feel
Right.
like home to him. Like home isn't in the sense of place. It's
Yeah.
the people that he's with, right? That's being a legionnaire, like that's home. So it didn't really matter if they're in Djibouti or wherever. But
Yeah.
whenever he's back in France, right, he's been forced out of this colony, right? It's sort of this reversal where he's the one being pushed out instead of these Europeans pushing in. Now he has to come back to his own country, and he realizes that
There's nothing there.
there's nothing there, and there's that moment
He's drinking.
towards the very end, uh, which is the second to last scene, which I thought was going to be the last scene,
Right.
where
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
he makes his bed, which of course that is a huge thing in any military service. This idea,
Again. Yeah.
right? It's kind of like reflecting this idea of order and stability, and then of course like there's the sexuality of a bed itself, right? The whole idea of
Sure. Yeah.
the things that
Yep.
go on in a bed, and the idea of having all these like straight curves and lines and that sort of thing to create this sense of control when nothing else is, when you can control nothing else, right? You can at least make your bed and make that right. And then he lies in bed, and he has the
He's
gun,
got his gun. Yeah, and he's
right?
got his like. Yeah, he's got the tattoo as well
Hmm.
on his chest.
And so my assumption at that moment was, he's gonna pull the trigger, and
Yeah, yeah.
and complete suicide.
Right.
But of course that's not what he does, which is almost somehow more tragic that
Why
because
do you
now he
think he
has
doesn't
to.
do that?
Why do I think he
Why do
doesn't
you
do
think
it?
he doesn't do that?
I mean, I guess he could. And then you're saying like that last like dancing scene is like
Well, the last dancing scene is in Djibouti, right? Which he isn't in anymore. So it must have been before.
right. Yeah. Yeah, I assume that he didn't because just because we but
You could almost argue too. It's like he's not on the earth anymore. He died,
yeah,
and
because it
he's
does
in
have
some
this kind
kind
of
of
surreal sort of. I mean, like
he's
again,
in a beautiful
that the way
afterlife.
he like dances, right? It's
Right.
like he's so like fluid with his movement, right?
This is the greatest ending of any movie ever made. Just a guy dancing to "Rhythm of the Night" by Corona, one of the greatest like dance tracks of all time.
One of the
I
greatest needle
love
drops.
the end. The end of the movie is amazing, and it's been quite discussed, right? Because it's just, but it's so good because it's so there's something kind of like freeing and beautiful about it, but there's also something kind of like creepy and unnerving about it too, because it's just him by himself at the club in Djibouti, which we have seen multiple times. Like we know that's the club, but he's like by himself and he's like smoking a cigarette. And, his dance moves are amazing. Great actor, by the way, Denis Levant. He's really good. He's in a lot of
Incredible.
movies. He's got this great look. Like the way that he looks is just great. And he's like smoking a cigarette while he's like dancing really amazingly. And uh I don't know, there's something kind of like kind of like empty about where he is, almost as if he did kill himself. You don't see him do it. He's
Right.
got like the tattoo on his chest that says serve the good cause then die, um, which is a crazy line, honestly. Serve the good cause, then die. You know, it's not serve the good cause and maybe die. It's serve the good cause and
And
die,
then
or
die.
die if you have to. It's serve the good cause, then die. So he's like, well, like I could see himself like killing himself, and then it's sort of like, I don't know, either like a memory of Djibouti in which like he was like for a moment like free of any kind of like I don't know, military preoccupations or masculine preoccupations, or and is free of any kind of like, made up constructions of like, gender and all this stuff. Like, and instead he just kind of like letting loose, and it's so good.
Yeah. But simultaneously, even though he's letting loose, it's sort of foreboding, right? I mean, he's in this dark room, he's wearing all black. There's no one there.
Right.
And he feels even though like he's completely free, he's also I don't know. I feel this sense of like isolation
He's alone. Yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
emptiness. I
He's like
mean,
in this liminal space. Nothing's going
yeah,
on. No one's there.
it's so strange. It's just does it looks almost otherworldly. I mean, we've
Yep.
seen this dance club multiple times throughout the film, but the
Right. That's
way
what it
it's
is.
framed is so strange with the leading line,
Yeah.
mirrors, and
Right.
the contrast between white and
Exactly.
black. Yeah, I guess you could suggest that maybe he's in some sort of limbo,
Purgatory, hell, whatever thing. I don't
purgatory.
know.
That maybe this is punishment or this is heaven. I
Or it
mean,
could just be a memory. It could
or
just
it could
be,
just be a memory. And yeah,
again, that's why the ending is so good. And that's why the movie is so good, is because it doesn't spell out anything. It doesn't, there is kind of like like a background narration, but I would argue you could even go as far as taking it out, because
yeah.
it's not even like that. It's not like the narration is like, you could probably like put all of the dialogue of the narration on like pieces of paper, maybe even like one piece of paper.
Hmm.
Like it's not it's not like very much at the narration at all. You could easily, I think it still kind of adds to it, because like I think like the narration is beautifully written and amazing, and it definitely adds to the movie ultimately. But you could arguably take it out and the movie would still have a strong effect.
Well, that's the crazy thing about the narration is the narration doesn't actually add any context to anything that's
No.
going on. It and it's not even like you're getting into his mindset or this is the way I feel. It's just
Mhm.
it's just like these poems almost that
Right.
sort of intertwine with the things that are going on and sort of his reflections on his memories. But it's weird because like this film works perfectly fine without the narration, and yet the narration, and I can't like grasp exactly
Yeah.
why the narration adds something to the piece. It's almost like it's this poetic quality to the piece, like it adds
I
these
just think it's a beautiful
feeling,
writing. Yeah.
and it is absolutely beautiful writing. I mean,
Yeah,
some of
it's
the
beautiful, and I
best
think
lines
like
come from
more beautiful things are good, and so adding
it.
so having it in there, I think is worth it than not because
Yeah.
it's just adding more, you know, making the movie even more great than it is. I'm just saying that like because the narration is so slim,
Hmm.
ultimately in terms of like quantity, again, I think you could still not have that, and it would still be an effective movie. Maybe not as effective though.
Yeah. And I think back to that, probably one of the toughest moments in the film
Hmm.
where Cincinnati is dropped off basically in the middle of the desert. And I assume the idea is he's supposed to walk his way back. And
Yeah.
you get that shot of like the spinning compass, right? It's not working or for whatever
Yeah.
reason. He can't seem to find his way back.
Right. He
And
he broke it.
he broke it. Yeah.
Galu broke it.
And so it looks very similar to like the salt flats in Utah.
Yep.
And it's like this like extremely white salt,
It's
literally
crazy
salt,
looking.
right? That's coming from the
It
ground.
looks like snow.
Yeah. And it's got like this weird, interesting texture to it, which you can see in at
Yeah.
the Salt Lakes in Utah too, just because of like the way it crystallizes with the water and stuff. And
Hmm.
so when he lays on top of it, it's almost like he's laying on this bed of nails almost, or like these, it
Yeah.
almost looks like fingers, right? Like they're
Yeah.
grabbing him, like pulling
It's
him
like
into the
coral.
earth. Yeah, it's got this really strange quality to it. And you kind of just see him give up. Like he just like he feels like
He,
there's
he
just
he's lost. Yeah.
yeah,
He's basically lost in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing there.
he's literally lost, right? He's lost his purpose, his meaning, his his reason to continue on. And that reveal that he's not actually dead is,
Hmm. As far as we can tell,
as far as we can
but it
tell. I
is
mean,
great.
he drinks water. It's such a
Right.
intriguing thought because like the traditional thing is like, okay, he's dead and now he
Yeah.
has to live with the guilt with it. But he doesn't know that Sitna dies, or
Yeah.
he doesn't know that he's alive, right? And so we have like this weird dramatic irony going on where part of him feels guilty that he thinks they killed this person, but we as the audience know that I mean, it is his fault, right? He did do something
He
terrible,
did.
but he survived, and it's like, well, and he doesn't know what happened to him, right? He just kind of like disappears.
Yeah.
Like
As far as we know.
there's no right, but there's nothing else of him, right? We never hear anything for the
Right.
rest. Like we have no
The
idea what
rest of the
happened.
movie, yeah. We just see the last image of him is like trying to like drink water in this because he was picked up by some Africans who were traveling nearby. And then yeah, that's it. We don't know what happens to him the rest of the movie. That's it. We just know he didn't outright die out in the salt flats.
Yeah. Hmm.
But yeah, it again, I have to again, like it sounds like the story, there's a lot going on in the story, right? Like in our discussion of it because again, like because it's easy, I think it's easy for you and I to talk about it in this way in like a very detailed kind of like in way because again the movie is so stripped back to its like basic kind of like scenes and activities of just like scene after scene of them doing chores and harmoniously doing chores and exercises and things like that, and so it leaves you and I to like really kind of like again run our imagination wild in discussing it because the movie again it doesn't have like any kind of like really detailed long scenes, a ton of dialogue. And again, I just think that is just kind of like indicative of a really intelligent kind of like filmmaking from Claire Denis, who doesn't feel the need to make a movie that has to be like overly written or over the top in its images or its moments. Um, Instead, obviously, there's a lot going on in the movie. Every single scene has something going on in it. And of course, it helps that the movie looks so beautiful, that it's written beautifully, that the acting in it is great, obviously. But again, in I don't want anyone to think like from our discussion that this is this incredibly eventful movie in which like all these crazy exciting things happen. Really, it's like quite close to the ground, very kind of a quiet, slow paced film. Um, but it has so much. Again, it's just a movie that has so much feeling in it. It's just it it it, it contains so much power by doing so little, I think.
Yeah, it's a really admirable feat that when I see in films, and it's not something that I can ever recreate, and maybe that's part of the admiration with this is, I mean, you think about just the last couple of films we watched, Collateral, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, maybe even Forever, a Woman to a certain degree. These films are so plot driven. I mean, they're so much
Right.
driven by this idea and this story, and that's what pushes everything forward.
Yeah.
And with a piece like this, even though you don't have that, you don't have really this thing pushing it forward. I mean, yes, it's sort of shaped in this sort of weird memory thing, but just like Playtime, which is one of my other favorite
Hmm.
films,
Right.
it has this weird hypnoticness to it, even though there's
Yeah.
almost nothing going on for most of the movie. I mean, we talk about those kind of big moments, but in a 90-minute movie, most of the movie is like they're doing laundry and they're walking around and
They're digging
they're
holes.
digging holes, their
They're
conversations like
doing,
they don't
yeah.
go anywhere.
Yeah.
And yet like I'm completely captured by it. Like
Yep.
not a single moment did I ever want to reach for my phone or ever turn away or even like want to pause it to do anything.
Yep.
Like I was that engrossed in it. I mean, that's like I understand that from like a filmmaking standpoint when you're making a film like Collateral. Like I get how they do that. Right? I understand the
Yep.
logic of how that works. But in films like this, it's it's like it goes over my like I don't understand why it works. Right? I don't understand why
Hmm.
I can sit for
Well,
90 minutes and
mhm.
never want to leave, right? At any single moment, like never get bored, even though
Yeah.
there's almost nothing going on.
Yeah.
It's magical. And
I,
I don't know how they do it. I really don't.
I think, well, I think that like for me, I was thinking about this. I think, and I have to admit, like, I still, even though like I love like a movie like this,
Yeah.
um, there is like a part of me that still is like, while I was watching it last night, there was a part of me that was just like, so it's like a very part of me, like deep inside my brain, you know, where, I'm still kind of, maybe a little, uh, uh, you know, my hypercritical part of my brain where I can't help but think like, so is this it? Like, so is this all we're gonna watch? And part of me is maybe still watching because I'm just like, oh, maybe now something will happen, or maybe something
Mhm.
now crazy will happen. So maybe that is like a part of why a movie like this you continue to watch it because it does
Yeah.
have a hypnotic quality, but you're also kind of thinking like, oh, is something crazy or insane gonna what is gonna happen? Because Trouble Every Day, another Claire Denis movie, which I watched in 35 millimeter last week that I talked about. It, that movie, of course, is another Claire Denis movie, very much like Beau, but it has those crazy, explosive, violent, insane moments. So as I'm watching this movie, I'm thinking like, okay, is it going to be something like that? Like, is something crazy going to happen? But the reality is, like, this is the moments that are happening, like the moments that you're watching in the movie in which you are thinking about what will happen next, like
Yeah.
that is what is happening. So again, I love all kinds of different movies, no matter what's going on, but there is kind of like that part of my brain while I was watching it where I can't help but have this feeling of like, kind of like that kind of sort of closed-minded thing of like, oh, something, crazy gonna happen? Is there gonna be a crazy, insane, kind of horrific moment? Um, but like that's kind of what the movie is against doing, pretty much.
Yeah. All right. Well, that feels like a great place to
Okay,
start wrapping up this episode.
I guess so.
So I will say loved it. This is only my second Claire Denis film after High Life, which is an
Mhm.
interesting like way to get into Claire Denis through High Life, much more
Well,
recent.
High Life was like, I mean, that's probably your most popular, successful
Yeah,
movie, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, it's probably got, well, of
Makes
course
sense.
it's in English, which helps because she is
Right.
French. So,
She's French.
films in English typically are more popular, and it's got Rat
Right.
Pat in it. And
Yeah, it's
I
got a lot of famous
remember,
people in it.
yeah, I remember it's got a,
Mia Goth,
no, that's not what I was thinking. I mean, yes, but,
Andre 3000.
Andre 3000,
Yeah,
which is crazy. But
that's cool.
yeah, so this is my second experience. I had an idea a bit of sort of her style, the way she kind of makes stuff, and this definitely fits into that. I wasn't surprised, I suppose, by this experience, and I loved it. I loved every minute of this film. As I keep saying over and over again, I just keep being drawn to these moments in this film, and it's just this film that I can just have on and just exist with. And there's this sense that you feel less that you're watching them and more as sort of you're almost a part of it. Like there's this weird sense of, oh,
Yeah.
I'm here. I'm a Legionnaire. I'm existing with these
Yeah.
people, even though there is this
Yeah, you're
sort
in
of
there.
gaze going on simultaneously. The Not the male gaze. Well, I don't know.
Sort of.
There's
It's like
the
a
gaze.
reverse sort of thing
Well,
going
it's
on.
sort of like the inverse of that
Yeah.
gaze, where we're sort of almost hypersexualizing
Uh-huh.
these people, and I don't think in like a cruel way or a bad way or anything like that.
Hmm.
But it's just such an extraordinary experience, and it's one of those films that because it plays like a memory, as a viewer, it feels almost like we're remembering it ourselves. So like when I just watched the film, obviously, so the experience I'm sure is different, the farther back. But even in my own
Hmm.
mind, it kind of has this memory-like quality to it, and you think of these big moments, but so much of the film isn't those big moments, and it's not really
Yeah.
about those big moments. I mean, those big moments are almost always sort of on the sidelines, right?
Yeah, they're never shown.
They almost always cut away from that stuff because that's not
Hmm.
really what the film is about. It's not about these big moments. It's all about all these little tiny moments that make up life, right? Like when we think about our
Right.
past, I mean, of course, the first thing we think of are these big moments, but most of our memories are just like these tiny, seemingly arbitrary things. And it's a
Yeah.
film about how sort of the arbitrary moments of life are what life is, right? Doing the
Hmm.
laundry, washing the dishes, making food. Like that's
Yeah.
what makes life life. That's most of what life is. And we need to enjoy that and celebrate it and be part of that. And when we lose
Yeah.
that, right, when we lose that sense
Right.
of belonging, we lose a reason to live entirely, just
Uh-huh.
as uh, he does in this piece. I mean,
Yeah.
fight the good cause, then die. But
Then
of
die.
course, the cause in this sense isn't, we're fighting to kill the Nazis or we're fighting to kill these people or that people or other people. Rather, the cause is just being part of this community. And once you lose that, and you actually see this a lot in people who leave the military,
Yeah.
is they have this real struggle with being with other people because they had this very specific type of community that they built. I mean, they lived with these people 24/7, and now suddenly they feel very isolated because the world can
Uh-huh.
be a very isolating place. And so
Yeah.
that's just it's very powerful and very moving and just an exceptional performance. I mean, a couple of exceptional performances,
Yeah,
truly.
they're all good.
And, and incredible use of music, and the writing is just so poetic and gosh, yeah, amazing movie overall. So,
Yeah.
a 9 out of 10 for me.
Yeah. Yeah, when yeah, and I think what you were talking about too about like him like kind of like losing that community. Again, the thing about it though is that he was being self-destructive,
Mhm.
right? Like he kind of like ruined it for himself. He didn't have to be so intensely mean to this guy.
Yeah.
But again, uh, it- again, the movie kind of has this kind of really strong like quality of like love and hate that's like really, really deep in the movie, even though it's not necessarily like spoken or said or acted upon. Um, and so yeah, so he loses that because of like his own self-destruction because it's like he's built up this community and this facade and he loves it, but it's also kind of like his downfall at the same time, in which it caused him to lose the thing that he loved most. So Yeah, this movie's fucking I love this movie, man. It is like I think it is masterpiece level stuff. Um so while watching the movie, I'm thinking like, yeah, this is like an 8, 9 out of 10 quality movie. But then like once you finish it and you like kind of like, do your go about the rest of like your night, which I did, I was just like, you know what? No. Like that movie from beginning to end had like it is such like a beautiful lyrical masterpiece, like in every way. Like it is so detailed and it is so measured. And for me, like I got to give it like the 10 out of 10 because it's just
Wow.
so um I don't know. It's just kind of like what a movie like. It's just incredible that a movie can be like that beautiful and effective to me. And watching and every single week when we talk, I'm always complaining about movies. And like a movie like this, I should have watched it way long ago. I should have watched it like 5 years ago. It's amazing when you see a movie like this and you realize, like, yes, like it's still worth it to watch movies and to watch every single movie as much as you try to watch every single movie, before you die, so that you can watch a movie like this and realize, like, yes, like movies can still have a power that is just like that is unbelievable, really.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I could not agree more. And I think one of the reasons I'm not a 10 out of 10 yet is I'm still too close to the experience. And
You just
I,
watch.
I literally just watched it like right before I got on here. And that's the reason I was a couple of minutes late is I
I mean,
just,
I only watched it last night, so I mean, it's
yeah.
just. But I feel you. I mean, like
No,
it's like I mean,
I
whatever, 9, 10, whatever. It's like
I mean, it might be there. I just like to give myself. I have this rule where if I watch a movie, I can never get a 10 out of 10 until at least 24 hours after seeing it because I want to make
Yeah.
sure that I still have that sort of same experience. Because I do have this tendency whenever I see a movie is like right after I see it, I always give it a much higher rating than
Yeah, yeah.
later on. And I think that that's just part of like, the film experience. I just get so excited about it. But I completely agree. I mean, lately there's just been like a lot of shitty movies that I'll see on TV or, advertisements for, and it's just like, oh,
Yeah,
God,
you're
like this is just like fucking shit. Like why should I justify spending an hour or two, after working all day watching a movie and then you see a movie like this? I'm like, oh, this is
right.
why we do this, right? This is why this exists. This is why like
That's why,
cinema,
yeah,
art,
it's
right?
why it's worth like it's why it's worth, yeah, like cinema is worth the time to kind of like go back, into the past and watch and to learn about movies from all over the world. It's not, obviously it's fun to do and it's fun to remember trivia and learn about like, new directors and stuff like that. But then again, once you like actually watch a movie that's great, which is rare, but it happens, you're just like, yep, like it's the power.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Lugo.
I'm on Letterboxd at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You can also find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And with nothing to say, and thank you all for listening.
Thank you again.